So, Ngonder delay, gosh,
Yeah, Lesa.
Oh, yeah.
And on behalf of everyone here in the Abbey and all other students, we want to thank you for continuing to teach Nagarjuna's precious Garland.
다 무tun의 송춘 낭야디 툭체나 쉬에 요레스.
Kuzutun
Maya.
Tama is shoes.
And Venerable Tipton Children is in Singapore right now, but she will be back in a couple of weeks to rejoin teaching.
The Singapore Yoresa.
Ah,
To den Jodula Annie Kimbo Singapore US.
yeah.
Dundra Nigel to pay res.
Oh, dear. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Good. Don't do matter, yeah.
Tenda Honzo Nomanding.
정말 등기래.
So we'll begin with our prayers. To the teacher endowed, transcendent destroyer, oneness gone, foe destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one gone to bliss, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and humans, to you the Buddha endowed, transcendent destroyer, glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. When, O supreme among humans, you were born on this earth, you paced 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great, compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path of freedom, too well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is a teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the bow of faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence, perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to may enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient being. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Kam Niryataya I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhist, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhist, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhist, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh yeah, Diksha again.
Yeah, this. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that yeah, consider. Oh, but then the other way, Umajuba Kosungudwa. Kanji Raju Chin Tuneba, getting Dirita Zimbar Machina. Yansar Louis Shaman Juguru Teleshina Kangi Long Jurs. Tenegarazu Chibachi in Bechane. Gyawangachida to Sama Kelegachiri Diora. So Ludi, Consona Koda Lede, Semde Lula Tembe, Semde Taru Shinja, and Elko Semde Quindi Shandajil Shinja, Gyawashandas Lagiora. O Ti Indico, Gyawajima Dreade, Gyawasambutangamba Dreade, Nisosuki, Gyawada Tivele Sangel Teniando Resera, Miguel Tungekus, Tishin Andrew Tamjetos. Miguel Sana Tunge Samata, Yasungu Tunge Chigresa. Kele Tendru Tamjeta, Namba Kundu Tevalas. Kevele, Miguel Chupambe, Kevele, la Sobatu Sana, Tendru, Sada Mila Sobatu Chigre, and it Tewakai, but the Teletani Ogre Sungudwa. Or the Kawachima Kawandu Madrute, Sosola Ramayo, Tanda Kudi, Sayal Ramayo. Kute sa tsada ne rawa ge yo maroko debu di mingiro o tisung do kanze rawa joji se tene ba se rawa ye ba che te randa chö tu ba la tembe tenjin sangma so so la chande se yuji le ke te yo re song go ra kanze rawa joji tene ba o ya ti so na
So here, as the Master Chandrakirti has said in his entry to the Middle Way, at this time where we have all of the freedom and conducive conditions, if we fail to take advantage of this, then in the future, falling into the abyss of the lower realms, how will we possibly get ourselves back up again? So here, by way of our being Dharma practitioners, when you're a Dharma practitioner, you accept that there are past and future lives. And at the end of this life, although we have to cast off our body, our mind going more and more and more subtle, that continuity will carry on into another life. And that follows after the kinds of actions that we have taken. This follows after the virtues and non-virtues that we have done. So as it's said, from non-virtue comes lower rebirth and all the various types of suffering that we experience. And from virtue come good rebirth as human or a god and all of the happiness that we experience. And so really we have to follow after the kinds of causes that we have created, but we have autonomy, we have freedom in the sense of when we create those causes, we have a choice. So right now we have that kind of autonomy or freedom to create those causes for our future happiness and suffering. And we have all of the kind of conducive conditions to be able to do this.
Yes, everything okay now.
네, 디소.
Yes.
잘했어. 뉴스에
디송게나.
뭐야 어디서 너 간지 라와 주지 튀나봐. 걔들 일단 짐벌 메시 나왔어. 되네 단다 말아줘 체들이야. 주사제 내손을 끼워디 파까 미끼와 주디 방는 내손을 끼워 파까 그러와. 근데 라다미 최주베 땡 개발진지 야 토베 돈다를 내가 마시 나선 거라. 짐벌 메시 마스도 양상에 소송라 말로와. 근데 땡도 라다미 공바야 진통경게 개통경게네 개레지 마시 나선 거라. 걔들 일단 짐벌 메시나 네 양살이야. 내 손숨라 롱사서나 네 교회 침마때 루디마 통나 내 손기 때려야 네 추투네 타르바다 탐제 캠바다 텐주 콤바시다 투에 네바요 마로와 어디인데 걔들 짐벌 메체나 양살로 샤와 조조와 텔레 치네 가글로 유루 티체서네 내 손을 깨잖아 소소야 아테네 라다멜케야 다시 티과 뽕케와 투에 란도리네 텐데 제 통게게 아니 땡코라 요 말도 어디인데 단단히 내 손을 마게 라다미 르디 개발신세 토웨치도 짐벌 제고 레송고다 야
So here, while we have this kind of state of freedom and all of these conducive conditions, if we fail to take advantage of that, that is, if we continue to create the causes for being born in the lower realms, if we don't make sure that we are engaging in virtues so as to secure a good rebirth in the future, a good rebirth as a human or a god, if we don't do that, if we fall into the abyss of the lower realms, then we are in such a state as we don't have the ability to create the causes for liberation or for omniscience or even the causes of gaining another good rebirth as a human or a god in the future. We will find ourselves in a sort of situation where we don't have the ability to follow the points of what should be adopted and what should be abandoned. If we don't in this life use it to our advantage, as in create virtue for the future.
야 저 남주가 저 근데 균이 수좀 내셔 매송고도 짐벌 제가 교대 가르쳐서는 몇 개와 주방 개와 주주에 그 수좀 되려 되어라 근데 교대 가르쳐서 근데 균이 수좀 내셔 매서 미리 주부게 수좀 내셔도 매송고도 근데 그 지다 뭐도 하다 매 고바 개발시 또 같이 벌래 아니 미리 주부게 수좀 돼서고도 아니 대 주주 대 가서라 gombollodu tanda ma jude umarenji teme ko stal dro sa so ka sang de tui chu chu ru se she do de ga le ani chuk shada tu te ba she ne chu chu ru stal ya do so kar ka du be se na ale kar se re chami tong da se ra chami tong da so sa se me se ke da de loksu member che ya da be so 로 메시게 그 추답데 안에 잘라라 소바트 줄 밀은 거고 다야 제다상 도줄이야 유주치야 안에 잘라사야 토야 내가 제도 줄에 잘라 현다这些 거고 다야 어떤 데 지켜 말에 초 메시게 되야 부시게 그래서 초 상부시게 그래서다 참이 돈다 초아사세 남메세세 셀리 lunga ko nango soche yo mare ser sumche tibe batele kasera chö chö dan ser chiba chö chö dan o reality chilamna ya
So here, as it is said, there is no path to the higher realms other than ethical conduct. And particularly if we want to secure a good rebirth in the future, we need to take up the ethics of abandoning the 10 non-virtues. This is the only way in which we are able to secure a good rebirth in the future. And in addition to abandoning those 10 non-virtues and engaging in the 10 virtues, as Nagarjuna has explained earlier in this this precious garland, there are actually 16 dharmas for higher rebirths that we should engage in. So in addition to abandoning the 10 non-virtues, he states that we should abandon intoxicants, which are the source of many problems, as well have a proper livelihood, a good way of sustaining ourselves. So the way that we conduct our livelihood should be such that we aren't deceiving others, that we aren't, like, say, putting a weight on the scale to cheat others in the way that we do business and so forth. We need to have a kind of livelihood that is ethical, that is grounded in that kind of ethical conduct. And so in addition to that, there is the abandonment of all harm to others, all kinds of violence that are not included in the 10 non-virtues, as well as making offerings to those who are worthy of offering.
야, 근데 대가리 야숨데 가서 그진다 최초다 잠바데스도 샬이야 아니 짐바들라 가지고 가셔 봐. 사실 짐바 최지 짐바 미지베 짐바시야. 저 짐바라 소바도 짐바데세 짐바 진이들 구셔다 하셔되네. 짐바 진거 봐. 근데 로아 보듯이나 소소 락베 라탄 락바 예바다 구셔다 지도 봐 짐바 진고를 서서다. 그진다 최초다. 내 라게 되네 가서래. 최바르베 되네 라게 캠볼라 소바로 최슈살로 소바텐데야. 대단히 연대쟁이. 연대 개발시 공나 공마 연대하고 여기 들소리야. 최초다. 그진다 최초다. 아니 잠바데스. 점수 재미 시시바. 잠바 재미 니지 재미 가와 재미 땅이 재미. 어디서 최초도 성도 자 잠바 재미 다도 강강원도 라다미 고마 토발이야. 좀 많이 받는데도 고 말이랬죠. 사 창바다든데 깨를 거고도 창발아서 보내 통불 깨를 듣고 요라. 어디 최초도 성도 된남 경아주 또 나치지. 사기나 아니 가서는 짐벌시고랑 해서 또 왜 말로세 짐벌시게 그 그디 티레도 게디테는 짐벌 메시 나스 란지메게 탑시데 최초도데 로고도 야
So here again, the 6 of these additional dharmas are offering to those who are worthy of offering. But before that is actually having respectfully making offerings, or being generous in a respectful way, making offerings to those who are worthy of offering, and having love and so forth. So here, when we are making offerings to others or being generous, we should do so in a way, and generosity can include material generosity, providing protection from fear, the generosity of advice, or the dharma. But when we are, say, like offering someone something to a beggar, we shouldn't just sort of like toss it to them, but we should do it in a respectful manner, whatever the cultural customs might be, such as using our right hand and so forth. When we are being generous, we should do so in a way that is respectful of the other. And additionally, the second of this set of 3 that comprise these 6 is making offerings to those who are worthy of offerings. So, for example, the preceptor from whom you have received vows, or those from whom you receive teachings, those who have particular kinds of special qualities that are worthy of our offerings, we should be making offerings to them. And then it says, and love and so forth, which really comprises all of the 4 immeasurables: love and compassion and joy and equanimity. And these are necessary, even if we don't have them in a fully uncontrived way. The cultivation of these immeasurables leads to a good rebirth, say in the Brahma realm. And so our taking up of these 16 dharmas for higher rebirth, this is the way in which we prevent ourselves, we take advantage such that we don't fall into the sufferings of the lower realms.
Oh yeah. 다디 던다데 추응데 추추추 뒤샤나 던다 숨날 뒤도 시에도 와. 요. 디카레스나. 가시래. 진짜 추좀 서서와. 짐바다에 지시해라. 짐바마다는 깨와 짐바라도 멜리케나 콜롬주를 보내. 네 저쪽에 삼로 고토가 말아. 진다서 추점되다 내가 주고 추점 먼저 라다 밀게 교코라지라. 진다 추점 수업하고도 대가 수업. 진다 추점 수설와세. 집어들려 집어 런주 집어서 말해서라. 숨용고와 초지 집어 미지배시 뭐 사성이 집어 숨용고도 와. 진다 수업들려 숨용고라. 내질래 지문nya 수업. 로 아니 동해 땅에 수업. 출랑에 벌써 수업하세. 어쩌줄이야. 진다 추점 수설와 세와세데 예와도 송도 집을 숨다. 대수 송도 와. 제가 다들 되셔나가지고 타르바다 탐제 김배 꼬바 토바 매베지 껴왔지만 사담이 뉴진 개발제지 토베야 치도 좀제데 대수부터 뺏겨서 보래도 진짜 추점 수사와 담주 람부치에서 담배추지 람브라침부터 들에서 대서 파샤네 에네 르라 강에 트래블라 소바 진짜 전에데 에네 셜이야 가서 로컬 주요 얼마다 셜 주요 얼마를 쏘고도 어디도 가서라 진바체 추점체 서바서부터 뺏겨서 뭐 등가주 신서파로 지바 주소되어 쏘고도 신배파로 지바 시절와 어디 교원되고 대왕원도 지금 맨날 대화 longe 매매라서 longe 그 어나 매력게나 그 최고 삼로다 삼로 텐데 코르트베요 말아 그 강에 코라세 그 삼받아 나 집에서 아니 그 집에다 제부도야 오실래 겨 삼부실래 민고고요나 수dim선을 하다 매력게나 하다 매때라 longe도 매미라 뒤에는 던져잡던데 때라 집에다 제부 매요라 어디인데 somebody 뺏겨서 뭐 진짜 주점 sösä와 담주 람부시 뭐데 추추도 가가 되나 디바에서도 야 어디 치로나
So, if we really summarize the causes for good conditions in the future, for securing a good rebirth with good conditions, we could really put them into 3 points. That of generosity, ethical conduct, and patience. These are necessary practices if we want to have not just a good rebirth, but one with the kind of necessary conditions for practice. So, generosity is important because even if we are born in the upper realms, but we have not been generous and we are lacking in material resources, then there's no way that we can pursue a dharma path. And so as well, in order to actually get such a good rebirth, there is no basis for that other than practicing ethics. Ethics is the actual cause of a good rebirth. And patience too is important such that we don't destroy the roots of our virtue. So here again, when it comes to something like generosity, it's not just material generosity, but this includes all of the kinds of generosity of giving protection from fear, the generosity of the Dharma, and so forth. And patience, too, includes the 3 types of patience of not thinking anything of harm done to you, being able to bear with various types of suffering, and patience in the face of the Dharma. And so, let alone attaining omniscience or the state of liberation or the state of omniscience, but securing for ourselves a good rebirth with all of the kinds of conditions in order to be able to practice. This is summarized as saying that really it is through generosity, ethics, and patience, the various divisions and types of those. This is the great path of Dharma. Just giving your body trouble, like through physical austerities, is not going to secure such a good rebirth with the kind of good conditions that we would like. But rather, these 3, generosity, ethical conduct, and patience, are incredibly important. As Chandrakirti has stated, for us in the desire realm, we need to have a certain amount of possessions. There's no happiness without things. And so if we fail to practice generosity and are born in a situation where we are utterly bereft of resources, then that means that all we can do is basically try to get what we need. And we don't want as well to just be generous, but have that generosity ripen in a lower rebirth. So we need to secure a good rebirth through our foundational practice of ethical conduct. And so too, we need the kind of practice of patience to secure those roots of virtue that we have created. And so here, if we really want to summarize the kind of 16 dharmas of higher rebirth, they could really be put into those 3 categories.
뭐야 어디인데 뒤가서래 ane chedelia meche ketanlia kimjandre chine dinal ko chawachi koda di chena chedela kibuche dewache dewe kyuche kyawachima dinami debu dewa yorwa inde ko nangmi debu china chimba labje kaya debu choji labje kaya debu tinde gora chimba choji chimba shara 상승지 침바스도 초와 자에 따뜻도 용거라 진다 에 추dim수 지질이야 초와 매바 공주마담바 지질 선반미 기본 마스바 진짜 제제 자야 용거라 진다 추dim수 아니 서바 코메 되지 미지 고도 또 진리만데 주나 서바 공기 구비잖아 아니 남비카가 태보다 라다냠도 조디신게 지소르지나 파르도 자고 템부마도 메템바 영에 주요 말와 집배가병이 시절 패도 김발라 소바tin 레톤에 판도시야더라. 아니 처음에시야더라. 며칠에. 아니 서바꾸메 또 준다 서바꾸메. 그래 제베네 소소 메제들라 기바 용거래.
Yes. So here in this life, if we comport ourselves, if we live in such a way as we practice these particularly generosity, ethical conduct, and patience, we are going to be creating good causes for the future, but also a greater happiness here in the present among those with whom we live and interact on a regular basis. If we are able to give advice to others, we are able to give to them when they are in need, in whatever capacity that might be, we are going to create better conditions around us. And so too, if we practice ethical conduct wherein we don't harm others, that is going to create more peace and harmony in the present, as well as good causes for the future. And so too, if we have this kind of patience wherein if something goes a little bit wrong or we encounter some kind of difficulty, we are able to bear with that, then this is going to be of great benefit to us, not just in terms of the causes that we are creating for our future lives, but also in the present and the kind of happiness that we experience with those around us.
오야 제인데 내 산제게 최tem바데 팬데게 교인 sekdo 남주 팬데 말루번 중에 고 산제 tem바세라 제인데 근데 제베네 체델레 때와 용고도 라신 김장이나라 지소이나라 지그치를 잡아서 왔는데 아마도 처음에 들으시는 그 체델레 때와를 되어도 체델 때와죠 될 때는 체델이야 그지 처음 매버시 들으신 내버리는데 겨워치만 남이 들라 하다 밀리게다 대다 른저야 제마 드나시오야게 고줄을 두어라 어디에 티페케시 버려도 지다 지소나 타르바토에다 들게 좀 매나르다 응원도 추추르세 지소날 베케치 버려도 텔 동반이다 들게 그 시에고면도 다 추어메다 라바 텐도 텐게 마르세로 들을 시에네 되어라 그때에네 동반이고 말해 동반이들 가지고 뒤따려야 뒤하고 장차네 애네야 타르바토고 동을 때도 타르바시고 위에서인데 하다 밀레께 와야 초주베 때는 거의 고그래도 대하고 동해지라 시절에 삼네 telaya 타르바치 내가 녀모게 라메 봐서 밀레께 야지 tel라 타르바치 고기 삼데 동반이게 담데 고도와 디마도 동반이게 담게 고요 말해 근데 담보 가지고 동반이 매나 난제디 가다베 라마 기시투 텐데 속도 초치네 직sol라 따와네 산제지 동의해서라 직달데 고치다 빠져라 녀모도 경 가가 용거라 얘나야 단다 가져려야 고요라 아 삼상간지데 숙참베나 당강에서 이렇게 지금 말은 다 지지도 그래 때문에 가 동에 용되게 삼도 텐데 숙제를 초진에 고편도를 저 요구하라 텐데 있잖아 얘는 직설을 따와네 사지 동의해서 사지 도에 주심식게 되고 삼로도 숙제를 주네 야를 저 영에 실을 줘야 줘라 어디 인도 가서라 근데 아버지 주선에 직다 교치마 라다 메고 봐도야 최주베 땐도 계신 물에도 이나 양진왕비 껴알람 버디 동해제랑시레스 다 텔레kia 타르쿠도 섬데 네 동반이라 소바 기분적인 남샤된 것도 와. 텔레 때는 텔레야 라지부 동해레 타로 많이 봐. 심지어 탐제가 또 투게게 동해레 타와 저 대체도 싸게 고바 토바 차고 그래서 기부천배 삼로 거기도 와. 뒤인데 대대비 삼로 좀 기찬네. 그래서 기부천고단 되게 전부 탐제게 또 통계게 그것에 연대 군대게 사계지 고반지 지내게 토버차님 대체도 대토지게 처리야 단단한 터바다 삼바다 야네 야도 꿈리치기 섬네 아니 그런 세담데 세나 슈니에데 베 겨울랍침벌 도토라 디스무지야.
So, the Buddha's teachings are referred to as being the source of benefit and happiness in the world, really referring to the kind of happiness that we experience in the short term, as well as the good ripening results, those benefits in future lives. So, if we live in such a way where we treat others with love, we don't harm them in any way, we will be happier and more peaceful in the present, in this life, and the ripening result of that will be beneficial to us in the future. So even without talking about liberation or attaining the state of omniscience, we don't even need to get into this talk of emptiness, but really by leading beings through the kind of a recognition of cause and effect, we can talk about the kind of course, death and impermanence, and recognizing that you're going to have to die and take a rebirth based upon the kind of actions that you have committed. So it is at that point where one might then begin to see the larger process of samsara, like recognizing that, well, maybe I want to get out of this suffering cycle wherein I'm taking rebirth uncontrollably due to the force of karma and the afflictions. But as some of the Kadampa masters have said, really the view of the perishable collection, we normally look at that as being the source of all of our problems. But that kind of view of the perishable collection is actually in some ways a starting point, because so much as beings like value themselves, they will enact ethical conduct and to ensure that they don't have to experience suffering in the future. And so really this is kind of like the starting point or the root cause of all of the good that we might accomplish, is from thinking, well, I want to avoid my future suffering. And when then one progresses from just thinking about the suffering of future lives to really recognizing how taking rebirth uncontrollably within samsara due to the force of karma and afflictions is something that you want to get out of, that this is a suffering situation, well then from there the talk of emptiness and so forth arises. And when one then comes to see, well, it's not just me who is in this suffering situation, but rather it is all other sentient beings who have shown me such great kindness, one then gives rise to this wish to become a Buddha in order to benefit all. So here, if we listen to the Dharma with such an intention, setting our motivation, thinking that in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings, may I become a Buddha, one who has eliminated all faults and developed all good qualities. And for that purpose, I am listening to this Dharma in order to be able to practice it and eventually be of greatest benefit to other sentient beings. Then our listening to the Dharma will be that much more powerful. So please, let's set such an intention for listening to the Dharma.
야, 당연히 대래서 쇼로가 시바디인바. 자다 시시시와. 시대. 다때 어네 거발했으나. 당연히 되다. 뭐보다 뭐 매바 그 라신지 마투바 셰바 뭐지 있어라. 뭐보다 뭐 라신지 마투바 셰바 들려서 전전도 니시지. 셰바 뭐스 다 뭐보다 뭐매 라신지 마투바 레스티 셰바도 셰도와. 되는데라. 이발 뭐보다 뭐 타실로 뭐 담보네 셰티르바. 어데 통다 퇴소 투바이 대미 좀바 멤버 송세더라. 통화 다수자 제로를 잘라서 봐 유튜브 연구라. 공부 셰바다 이 셰바도 저 유튜브 연구라. 통해 소다 tebe yu chada se te da lu chi rek chala so ba yu tu su te ti ru rek cha chu tu so da thong da te so to ba ye den me se yu tu bu ti so gor da nam she tu gi yu su ta ti ru rek cha chu tu so sa thong da te so to ba san je chum den de ge den ba tu ba ma re se nga ran zu na wa na shi yu rang ne ya chuk tu tu ba rawang tu ba 제 쇠바 딱 쇠바를 직비가 누구도 샀잖아 지라야 이베스라치 삼로 코여라 자예나다 네바이나 예도와이나다 예도메와이나다 자녀바이나다 티신바이나 가가 유랑원에베 랑신기 랑원에 집 예베스라치 와라 집 누구도 사 예바라치 디나 소소 된데게 요 말을 차셔만 무질 도움네 소소 삼배 똑배왕게 봐 쬐셔 tokpe wangi jikten nam tate sana shige. Tingare zu pa le pa takpe wangi shagyo ramado. Tin namba tamche tu yeto wang ta me wang chata nye tu tu rangshin ki tsuchi yo na sui tona yeto wang tong tongro ta me ta la ta sui tona ko chikwari tonggo ra. Ti tonggo yo mara kasha yagu tonggo re, kasha tugu tonggo re, kasha parma tonggo re, kasha samlo koran la yon tonggo mara. Tiende ko tokpe wange sha koran jikten tanya ji wange sha chashe mambo chila tenche tedala tenne ne pa mingchi ta shide te te che sha jure ma to tena ne chikin bar che rangwe ne ta ten tsena nye yo ten de chike yo mara ti song do thonda to so to ba ye se na na shin yu rawa de tu ba na na shin tempa mare se ताने रांगोने मेवर ये ना ने पेट मेवर बेस ना चुंबे चावने मेवर बेस ना और तेरे मारे से चुंबे से नवा नशी तेरे माइन बे चुंबे ये ना या चावने मेवर तेरे मारे से चुंबे तेरे तेरे मारे से तेरा तेरे में चुंबे मेवर सों से और तीसरा ये तीसरा ना या
So here, as for where we had left off in the text, we are then beginning with verse 104. I think we did this, but we'll review it a little bit. So here, this is really under this point of the absence of inherent existence of existence and non-existence, which is divided into the actual explanation and the reason for not answering any of the four extremes. So here, beginning with the actual explanation, it says in the first half of this verse, as for what one sees, hears, and so on, the sage did not call them either true or false. So all of the various objects of our six senses, they are not established in the way that they appear to us. They appear to us as though they were like concrete, as though they had this kind of autonomous existence in and of themselves, as if they were able to withstand or bear analysis, as if there was something that we could point to and say, well, this is that thing, whether it is something that appears to us as pleasant or unpleasant, like some kind of enchanting noise or some kind of forms that we might see. They appear in this way as though they had a kind of like autonomous existence, but they don't actually exist in that way. They are merely designated by the force of thought, by the force of convention. As it is said, the entire world comes from mental designation. So if they had that kind of existence that they appear to have in the way that they appear to our various sense consciousness and our mental consciousness, then they would have to be seen as the same by all of those who perceived them. Any sort of being, God, human, or otherwise, would have to look at that object and see it as the same. If we see it as pleasant, everyone would see it as pleasant. If we see it as unpleasant, everyone would see it as unpleasant. But rather, that is not the way that it is. All of these phenomena are posited by the force of conceptuality, through the force of conventions. So those objects that appear again, as it says here, as for what one sees, hears, and so on, the sage did not call them either true, as in existing in the way that they appear, nor did he say that they are false in the sense of being utterly non-existent, although they appear in a way as though they had this kind of autonomous, independent existence in and of themselves. That doesn't, in turn, lead to them being utterly non-existent or totally false.
어야 다들 되셔라 다연들 가지티 또바 디스고도 현다 또바 고요라 너마와 뜨고 또바 고요라 디까지 오래서나 근데 템바르 여바데 빠르서라 뭐뭐 장마데 최 장마 탐제 템바르 여바데 까나 근데 그 템바르 매바 저기 오래데 여바데 템바르 매바이나 근데 매바데 템바르 여고 그래 삼기도 와 여바데 템바르 매나 근데 매바 동바데 템바르 여고 그래서 그래서 템바르 여바데 치다 템바르 여바다 매바 세데 뭐게르 봐서 뭐게서 셔셔라 근데 딱 봐다 메다봐 제바다 메다봐 라 봄바다 봄바 많이 봐서라 뭐게지 근데 딱 봐 임바 로야 줍서나 메다봐 임바도 봐케고라 메다봐 임바도 로 봐케나 근데 딱 봐 임바도 야 줍여다 된대지 남주 영주시 최딩이 날 뒤쪽에 시디야 재미 좀내 시디 캐고게 시치 그때도 남주 영주시도 시디 때도 재미다 버려서 때는 딱바 캐고라 시디 때도 딱 버려서 좀 메다바 봐 캐고라 남주 영주시도 네가 임바 멤버 네가 마임바 멤버 공개하지 거라 네다 니만지 풍성 메시 봤어다 뭐게서 그라 다음에다 다부 셴메다 다부라 셴바다 마셴바다 어디 좀다 가지고 어디 뭐게 인데 예바데 템바르 매나네 매바데 템바르 요구레 삼기도 와 디디 가서라 예바다 매바니데 뭐게 레데 예바 템바르 매나 매바 템바르 요구에지 요마라 템바르 요바데 가서라 근데 예바 템바르 매나 매바 템바르 요구에지 요마라 예바다 매바지네 뭐게 이나야 디다 그 가서라 세부치 매부치 엔데 추추가 치고도 와 다 들려내줘라. 컨디션도스나 템바르 여바까나 디도사서 그걸에서 신나서디로 템바르 여메 텐데 니가 저도 랑신게 주바면데 뭐보 어디다 들려라로 발해줘도 뭐메 템바르 신나세 템바르 여메 텐데 니가 저도 랑신게 주바면 템바르 여바에 랑신게 가서 뭐보 여바도 템바르 주바 말에 뭐보 매바에 템바르 주바 말에 뭐보 뭐메 가이나 템바르 주바시 요 말에 실랑겨도 템바르 여메 텐데 니가 저도 랑신게 주바 말에서 뭐보 랑신게 주베 초레 겐다 미도쇼 뭐메 랑신게 주바 뭐메 랑신게 주고나 뭐보 맞아라 템바르 여메 니가 저도 랑신게 주바 말에서 템바르 여바 뭐보 여바에 랑신게 여바에 템바르 주베 시오마 매바데 템바르 주바 요 말에서 뭐보 랑신게 주베 초레 겐다 미도쇼 뭐보 랑신게 주베 초게 겐다 미도쇼 매바데 랑신게 주고나 뭐보 랑신게 마주베 실수 제 뭐보다 뭐면 니가 돈다 랑신게 주고 말해서 됐어도 로마데 통다 터서 투바에 때문에 좀 멤버 손티디 살아 아니 초레 미트 초주나 되는 니가 돈도 매세 예배 초이나다 예배 초이나다 팀 미트쇼 예배 초이나다 니가 돈 템바 마투바데 마도 예바데 뭐 예바 템바 마투나 매바데 템바 요코야 텐데 말해서라 이거 초레 미트 초주와세 그 meeting becho, meeting temperature yo mare, no temper matuna, no temperature yo mares. Niga tondo means, Niga, Mobodang, Niga, temperature to yo mares, like auto. Yeah.
So here, then in the second half of this verse, there's an objection that is raised by those kind of realists, wherein they think that, well, if you have refuted the existence of the true existence, then that would mean that utter non-existence, or the non-existence, the other side of that non-existence, would become inherently existent, because of the fact that they assert those two are direct opposites, right? So here, this is a mischaracterization, but these realists think that, well, if something being existent is the sort of direct opposite of being non-existent. If that existent is then asserted to be not inherently existent, and it's mutually exclusive with that which is non-existent, well, then the non-existent would become inherently existent. Sort of like the way that if you have something that is permanent, that negates it being able to be impermanent, right? If we say that something is a product, is likewise, then that is in direct opposition to it being permanent. And so here, if one, in this kind of relationship of two things that are mutually exclusive, when we establish the presence of one, that negates the presence of the other. If one is established by a valid cognition, then that implies that the opposite of the other. So here, this is the case for those things that are in direct opposition. And as the translator, I'm forgetting the proper kind of terms, but when we eliminate one, if that establishes the other, when you have this kind of relationship of two things being mutually exclusive and in direct opposition, then by eliminating one, that establishes the other. So here, these realists are mistakenly thinking that, well, if you have refuted the existence of true existence, then that must mean that non-existence has to be inherently existent, because it is the opposite of existence, and those two are in opposition in this way. And so here, this is not the case, however. I'll read the second half of this verse where it says, if from one position its opposite arises, both do not in fact exist. So again, in Gyaltsabje's commentary, he explains the kind of objection raised by these realists in this, where it says that if one refutes or stops the existence of that which is truly established, then utter non-existence, or alternatively, non-existence would become truly established, because these two, being existent and non-existent, are direct opposites. And so here, the response to that, our own position, is that a truly existent and a truly non-existent non-existent, and both of those are not truly established. So here, it is the case that neither the kind of a truly existent thing nor a truly non-existent thing, neither of those are inherently existent. As it says here, if from one position its opposite arises, both do not in fact exist. And so here, this is a kind of false equivalency to say that because one is refuting true existence, then that must mean that non-existence is inherently existent. So here, again, this is under the point of the absence of inherent existence of both existence and non-existence.
Oh, yeah. Tadilta, Tashir Loma Dembe Chuse, Sanje Lia Jide Tatan Dembare, Mandembare, Ya should do some Lema Sumberwa, the Lema Sumber Sumdan, Chiribata Tendria, Jide Tatan Dembatan Bedemba, Lema Sumberes, Lanka Matuveres, at Tendel Koyara, Tende Mares, Lema Sumber Chuse, 규제len 카실len 송교를 카실len 송교 말아 다 여러 메르스 카실len 송교를 카실len 송교 말아 디파조들 팬도 요 마요 시기시기체 뒤제 감도 서바칸가 챙기 유자 디레션에 연구하러 마도 제 랭께 마도는 맞아 디레케리어 말도 어디서래 kanshi tedar namgundu yo meensi, kanshi tedar namgundu yo meensi, kanshi tedar namgundu yo meen, teni kunjinji tayo tame niga da, niga meensi chige tensi, jigdenla tayo arda, ta meba reda, ta yeme niga reda, niga mayimba reda, sitinde ya tiwa shuna, ane kamgali ya len songu yo ma re chera. Oti lema son karasan jigden ko cho chingi kora rangshingi yoba shishache, rangune yoba shishache ko ti samado, ti samlu nal rangune mena meba tan, yona rangune yoga bachigu mado samlu kotugu yo marwa. Oti yendo tinde kaptila lene lensogu yo mare. Ko lenso ne rangshingi yoba kotugu yo ara. Iti nega masu na yaga yoga ara, o tinde chensugu yo ara. O ti karsun dosino. Tadan jigden dinese, 달이야 또 지대들이야 통마듯이 뒤뒤 주네 사바초래 뒤달이요 말해서라 야나 뒤달이요 말해서라 하나 니가 그래서 니가 말해서 근데 롱마데 말해서라 다다 지대들이 kun진지 타 여바다 타 매바다 타 여바래서 롱마다래 타 매바래서 롱마다래 타여 타미 니가 그래서 롱마다래 니가 많이 바래서 롱마데 말해서라 니가 많이 버셔 롱마데 버려. 때 롱마데 버 주전 가르스나 다다 지대 kan시 때들 넘버 군도 랑신기 여바 멤버셔서 군도 가르테나 랑신기 여바 군도 가라. 어 제인데 코티 랭장나 랑신기 여바데 학버야 다다 페줘야다. 근데 줄을 두요라. 계속도 롱땡기 오마레스 거라. 어 근데도 kan시 때들 남군도 여메세 나바콘도 랑신지 투바시요 말에 제인데 군지게 된데 롱타는 거 랑신지 투바야 다다 팬도요 아마도 들려 팬도케 용거 말에 대대는 해서고 말이잖아 군지게 타요 타면 니가 민시 지게 댄스 지게 댄데 댄 말인데 그 다다 팬도에 줄을 두고 그래서 소거라 야 되실라나
So here then in verse 105, it reads, hence this world is ultimately beyond truth and falsity. Therefore, the Buddha does not accept that it really exists or does not. So here, when it comes to certain questions that were posed to the Buddha, there were times in which the Buddha did not give a particular answer. And some would look at this and say, well, oh, that's because the Buddha didn't know or he didn't have the proper response to give. However, it is really out of skillful means. There were some times when questions were asked, such as, is there like a kind of limit, a beginning or an end to the universe, and other such questions, that the Buddha would not give an answer based upon the kind of faculties of the recipient, the person who was asking. Because in this case, the person who is asking about the kind of limits of the universe, for example, the world, is basically asking that question from a place of holding there to be inherent existence as a premise. The Buddha recognized that that's not going to be of benefit to answer to give an answer to that question. So as we then see in verse 106, wherein it says, how could the omniscient one say that what he knows to be utterly non-existent is finite or infinite, both or neither? So here, when it comes to the person and the universe or the world, the omniscient one did not state that it had either a limit, no limit, both or neither. And there is a reason for that. And it's not just that that, again, the Buddha didn't have an answer, wasn't able to answer, but rather recognizing that in all ways these are not truly existent. And the person who is posing this question is holding that if something exists, it must be inherently existent. And if it's not inherently existent, then it's utterly non-existent. There is a reason for which he did not respond to this question. And so it says then there's a reason that the Buddha didn't give an answer. And it is because the self and the world are in all ways not inherently existent. So how could the omniscient one say that what he knows to be utterly non-existent, as in something that is inherently existent, could be either infinite or finite, or both or neither?
This oh yeah. Padre oh yeah. Padre Jude Koalia Koalia Koechi the Lung Madame but the Regi Mares Sabachuda Koala Tai Mass to the Lung Madame but the Regi Mares Sabayangudua. Oh, the conditions figuration. Oh, Sanje Trame Shik the Shin Kinjuruata Shinjuruata Tadarshu Chamber Juruata Tata Shubata Maubad Shinjuta Chansimba the Thomasura that two some just Sanje Tablis. Simja Namne Chavar Jur Tele Tusum Neba Konsa Tati Karsidosana Sanje Trame Ngari Shake was the Chansimba Debe Sanje Suara Sanje Trame Shakes Simba Pepsimba to chair. Teshendo Changurs the Maobana Chumber US Sanjesura. Teshendo Maobana Chumber Jurata. Changuru Tatar shoes, Tata Shuba Sanjechum de Nam Jesu. Then you can come Chiglia, Archun Simbata, Maoba Chumber Juata, Tata Chun Simba, Chusung Simba Tezu Sigara. And the Kasidosana. Shuba Simjan Namne, Tunikas, Tadar Shuba. Shukpe as Shuba Sanje Chumden Namjisuada. Simjan Namne Sanje Rede Sanje Rede Simjan Shaw Mamboya Tarba Samje Kimbalia Truba Zegi or Resigada. Shube Simjan Namne Sanje Rede Shaw Jurne Teleja Shaw Lagbata Tame Bashia Tarba Samje Kimbalia Truba Zegi or Resigada. Che Mawa Taron Zebal Jelas. Yinaya, Tele Simjan, Tele Simjan Yangelin Davechedo, Tusum to Neba Con Simjan Yangele, Dor Zelas, the Sanje Reja, Tata Maobata Deva Kaduina Cochutane, Sanje Yangelin Deva, Koala Tarban Zevi or Resigora. Oh, Jindukasura. Sanje Trambe Shek the Shin Chen Juruada Tadar Shoes Simjan Namne Chevar Jursia Tarban Zavasura. Tele Tusum Neva Conse Tanda Ena Co Tusum do Simjaya Chutan Tarbalaya Tua Kongbajani Shuya the Eseri Sudwa. This one, yeah.
Super dirwa?
No. Solo Tumba.
No.
This one.
Dison.
Oh, yeah.
So, then next we turn to, again, a kind of objection that is raised. And so here, this is under this point of dispelling an objection that not teaching an end to cyclic existence is wrong. So here, this first begins with the kind of objection that is raised by the interlocutor, who says then in verse 107, There have been innumerable past Buddhas, likewise, future Buddhas and present Buddhas are innumerable. And the extent of the three times sentient beings is considered to be zillions of times more than those Buddhas. So there have been countless Buddhas who have come in the past, Buddhas who are here abiding in the present, Buddhas who will come in the future. So really, we can talk about there being countless Buddhas in the three times. And those Buddhas, their whole sort of intent is to lead sentient beings to liberation, to help sentient beings get out of this state of samsara. And so if we have this like innumerable amount of Buddhas in the past and in the present and in the future as well, who are all working to lead these sentient beings to a state of liberation through teaching them the Dharma and so forth, then how this will continue into the next verse. One would think that there would have to be some kind of an end, given that with all of these countless Buddhas of the three times who are leading even more sentient beings, and the extent of the three times sentient beings is considered to be zillions of times more than those Buddhas. So here, this is sort of midway through the objection, but basically raising the question of how could there not be then an end to the world, to the universe?
Yeah, that's true. So, look at Jebero. Yeah, Jebero this one. I think that is. Gona nyangele ndor zela ashe timishe. That in the corridor. Shabbat to some nebane. You can pay to my Simja Tamje Kimbe Chidarity. When the Luma temper jazz voice, that you just said. Armage Simja Kyoa Bisibe Simja Pewan Melasida. Don't call ya Tambune Simja Yoga to Yoga Remato. Ngar maybe Simja Sabaki or Marwa. Jiden kam Dilia ngar meba Sabaki and Gedi Uguramato. Chidangar maybe Simja Saba Sajansi or Marwa. Toma mebane yoga to yoga, of course, drunk a maybe yoga. Oh, Tindu Kasura. Ngar meji Simja Kyoa Missy Besa. Koana ngar maybe Simja Sabaki or Marichera. Kyoa Missy Be. Simja Pewan in Melas. Simja Mar Drake Omara. Ngar maybe Simja Sabaki in Simja Mar Drayora. Tanzambuni chick double shana de Komar Madret and your Drayora. Chitansiora. Ngar meji Simja. Kyoa Missy Be. Simja Pewan in Melas. Simja Seba Tusum to Nebane. Simja Yejide. Peve Cumin Bese. Jupemedo. Oh, do it. Simja Seba Sera. That Tarba Tom to Sanje Koba Tom to na. Simja my budget Sanje to the red of your no. Oh, Simja Seba Tusum to Nebane. Simja Yejide. Peve Cumin Lase. Tico Simja Ma. Ta new dredge Kayo Marte. You know, go pay to get your Mara. Mondredge or Mara, you don't know. Simja, you call it Tamje Kimbachi, there's Simja get Tamje Kimbachi, there Simja, Mundada, Tamje Kimba Sanje Sigura, Simja, Mungi Tayo Mayuda, Chimatsoe Mayuda, Otisungura, Mungita. Tambu the nation at Tital Simja Homar, Sabat nation resident went to Yora. Chidasu Tamatso, a Tassimja Homar, so sorry said, Chidasigora. When you tada, Chida long, Demba, long my Dember, Zes, or this on the long Demba Manzeberes. Simja Tada Dember, Tada Mendeberes, long Demba Manzeberes. 탈롱 마덴버 제베 나르 도마 세제 심제 만부야 sen 상계 루요라 세제 폐와 중세자 매배 치료시에서 다들 저바 고쳐도 여기 다마한테 뜰시에네 띠래도 저바 초저베래도 같이도시네 세바 투숨 내바네 지대표에 주마이셔 심메네 탐제 캠베 지대르데 응다 롱마 템버제세 응게 타다 심메타 롱 마템버데 르메도세 심제 조에 도와세 탐제 캠베 심제 응게 타다 심메타 롱 마템버제바 롱 마뎀 다저레 롱 마뎀버제세 나르 tumba 세지 중세게 매베 얻데 심제 탄도 와서 레레레 타다 요라 심제 레레레 타서네 고 심제 매베 사게 요라 다 심제 베존데 탈신다네 테티 로데 카부데 되어다 레레레 잖아 심제 조에 요라 상게 요라 다 지단에 조에 요르베선 다데 카부라 코 토마 매만데 다다버도 그 상게기 지기체데 조요만 다단다 조에지 용마라 장가 거메라 어디르셔 다디 저바디르도 그래서 세바트 숨내바는 지대 폐회 규마에서 야마르 야마라 심제 탐제 캠베 지대르데 응원다 롱마 템버제세 다다 치메타 유마이스 랜 만져바 카레 랜 제네 디기도 와세 심제 사케르다 저한테 누가 하셔야 돼. 레레레 전에 연구라. 지단 전에 연구마로. 야, 뒤질라나.
So here, continuing with this objection that's being raised here in the next verse, verse 108, it reads, the world's cessation occurring in the three times does not cause its increase. Why then did the omniscient one maintain that its beginning and end are indeterminate? So here, when it comes to the beings within samsara, we can't talk about the creation of new beings, right? So there are countless beings within the universe, but those that didn't exist before, it's not possible for there to be new beings that are newly created. So there isn't a kind of increase in terms of the number of beings, right? Whoever was here, whatever kind of beings we have within this universe. And here we have to be careful when we say beings within the world. I mean, beings can take birth within different worlds. So someone could, one world could experience an increase in the number of beings. But when we talk about samsara as a whole, we can't speak of there being an increase in the number of beings within samsara. That is something that has been countless since beginningless time. And so, it's again then, because it is not possible for there to be newly arisen sentient beings, and we have these Buddhas abiding in the three times who are leading to the cessation, as in these beings are achieving a state of omniscience or liberation, well then wouldn't it be the case that there would be a kind of as there's no increase in the new number of beings and they're being decreased through this kind of cessation, then this again, objector is saying that, well, it seems logical that there should be then an end to the universe, right? Given that there aren't new beings being created. Why wouldn't the Buddha just say that there is an end rather than not responding? Now, here, when it comes to, we have to make sure that we understand that when it comes to a particular individual, although we can't pinpoint a beginning to the continuum of that sentient being, we could say that there's an end. When they become a Buddha, they are no longer a sentient being. But when we talk about samsara in general, we can't speak about there being a beginning or an end. And so here, this, again, the objector is raising this point that, well, because there is no way to newly generate sentient beings, and we have the kind of cessation of these beings in the sense that because Buddhas are here teaching and liberating beings, and given that there's no sort of cause for the increase of samsara, then it would seem that, like they ask, well, then why is it that the Buddha left unanswered whether there is a beginning to this universe or an end kind of limit to that? Because if it is the case that you are sort of exhausting those that were previously there, and there is not even the slightest cause for increase, well then wouldn't it seem that the Buddha should have answered that there is an end to the universe? So here, this is again the kind of objection that is being raised.
Yeah. 다든다 네 솔로가 꾸버들어. 야. 다 수트에 되고 또 담바 주발을 삼로 시샤 전에 수트 연대는 때려 발렌 전에 되게 말해시 내기도 그 수트에 되고 또 담바 주발랑 신기 여고 바 시샤 제제 랑신기 여보다 여번에 가가 침매던 게 싸워네 그 시샤 제제 되게 어라네 여를 손잖아 매를 손치까지나 여래서는 여바 라운드 여바 코메스는 때문에 고도에 가요라 대손자 내 맞아 버려서 내기도 저 롱텀 바메릭 배추세디 셰도 소소이케오 라상와세 소소이케오 동반이 때문에 너도 미롱게 어때서야 동반이 내 상와세는 때때때바데리 말해서 내면진 돌아 상고로 내 많이 벤돌 동반이 때는 로다게 냐가요라 코카가 최신기 오마르도 대진 레버지와 잠도 자신 네바데 야군 조신기 매나 내 동반이 시도 자고 냐가요라 그 동반이 때문에 들어온 거 말해서라 스스교 라상와세 동반이 예상와 상회 담부터 다 너도 메롱알라 상고에서 내 상와시거라 신치단 상하게 말아 너도 메롱할 때는 고견 용거들 소소교 라상와 강의 때는 삼매초서 어때서 상고가 강의 받더라 사무 동반이게 최디시나 소거라 지대 좀마다 보니 산제 템바 튜르이르베 튜르이세서라 튜르이 다티 발렌च्या도 가르치도스나 네미게 소소교라 상황 강의 받더니 상황 제고가 강의 받대 사무 동반이게 최디레셔라 대야 네 가시나 지대 나라랑 심해봐 주마다 보니 지대된 가서 뭐 정말 나가는데서 랑원에 여봐시 유코랑 원에 봐 따서 제서 버르지 지그 랑신지 랑와도 전에 주요돼 버리 통과하라 어디 지대 나와나시 랑신 요 말은 그래서 나와도 랑원에 여봐 랑신지 여봐 랑와도 여봐다 보시 따서 제서도 여봐다 보시 그랑 영원에 지프게 조조서 여봐라시 나기와라 지대 나와 랑신 매봐 주마다보다 나와나시 매봐 주마다보다 와라 주마되고 지여야 되고 나와나시 지여 말와 배려보라다 모샴부나 시리여 말아 고체다 나다 된데 점지 통해서 소셔라 주마되 와라 주마 나와나시 요 말아 주메 따달랑보 주변에시 따라요 말아 보마도 지나야 통해야 와라 원래서다 소소교 라상와 강에 봐 삼매초인 라테야 가신단 지대 나와 라시메 봐 주마다오니 라세 테나 산제기 템베닝부 산제기 템베닝부데 동반이로와 템베닝부 동반이 최송에 가가 땡지 레버죠 송송의 원에 타델이야 동네도 되고라 동네도 되는 영어 강가시 tarwa 통거라 저어데 tarwa 토베치도 숨겨라 저 템베닝부 동반이들에서라 되네 산계지 템베닝부 뒤지 인베스 뒤지 따부터에서라 뒤지 통나 치와 매버 도교하라 티나시 동반이 거나 아니 량이 좋아게 치와 매버 tarwa 도교하라 이제 맥베 전제 세번 남기 따과 남네 많이 넣어서 대바를 매버치지 로 따과 나시기 대바 여바치네 많이 넣어서 땅마 치디리 소세 소세교 라상와 간이 때네 사미추 지게 교마다부디에서 낭라랑 심해버 교마다부 자원에 매버 많이 게 러보람 보삼기 부다부 많이 봐 지요주 여바실이야 그러나 나와 따로 매봐 나와나 시전에 피게 지 유코랑 왜네 지여버지 마잉게 마보치 추동 늘려봐 따버시 텐데 삼코요 말아 유코랑 왜네 지여버지 추따버나시 라원에 여버나시 티 규마다 보니 산제 템바 주지리세 다들 사면다 산제게 템베님부 주지 얘기세 미베 저기 심반남게 따과다로 많이 넣어서 그 소소교 따과나시 말에서 산제가 손반나시게 되네 규마다 버려서 어디셔도 비서야 비서래 소소교 라상와 간예되네 삼매체 지대 규마다 보니 산제 템바 뒤지레 이제 말에 뒤지 인세되래 뒤지 인세라 기구리를 시켜도와 뒤지 인세야 뒤시되나 그래서
Dixon.
어야 어디
So here, then in the next verse, 109, this is really kind of giving the response to why the Buddha hasn't answered about there being a limit. And this is basically because, again, as was stated above, that although in general we can say that there's no end to samsara, individual beings can have an end, but those that are asking, that are posing this question, are posing it from the point of view of holding that ultimately there is inherent existence. And so however the Buddha were to answer, that would be a problem. If he said, yes, there is some kind of an end or there isn't an end, they would either fall into thinking that there is some kind of autonomous inherent existence or that things are utterly non-existent. So these are individuals who don't know how to understand the kind of profundity of there being a lack of inherent existence, but still being functional dependent arising. So here, as comes in verse 109, it says, such is the profound dharma that is obscure to ordinary beings, that the world is like an illusion, is the ambrosia of the Buddha's teachings. So here, this is something that is to be kept sort of secret. It's not in general like to be kept secret, but secret for those who are holding wrong views, such that it would be detrimental to them if they were taught this profound emptiness. So here, when we see those that are kind of unsuitable recipients of this profound dharma, basically, the Buddha did not answer to this because it would give them, they would understand it wrongly. They would misinterpret this kind of profound dharma. And so here it explains that all of the world appears, right? But it is lacking inherent existence, like an illusion. So that the world is like an illusion is the ambrosia of the Buddha's teachings. So all of these various phenomena appear to us, and they appear to have a kind of autonomous, concrete, inherent existence, like from their own side, this kind of objective existence where we should be able to sort of scrutinize or analyze them and find something that is able to bear analysis, bear that kind of scrutiny, something that we could point to and say, well, this is that thing. However, none of these phenomena, the world does not exist in the way that it appears. It appears as as though it has that kind of existence, but it doesn't exist in that way. So this is like an illusion in that there is something that is appearing. It's not something like the son of a barren woman or a rabbit's horn that is utterly non-existent, but rather these appearances don't exist in the way that they appear. They are illusion-like. And so the Buddha, all of the Dharma that he has taught is for the sake of liberation. And really the Dharma teaching emptiness, this profound emptiness, is like the essence or the amrita, the ambrosia of the Buddha's teachings. And so in the same way that if you were to take some kind of special nectar or elixir, one would attain this kind of deathless state. So too, by imbibing the ambrosia of the Buddha's teachings, one is able to get beyond the kind of birth and death due to karma and the afflictions. By realizing emptiness, one could attain that kind of deathlessness. And so again, this is something wherein one needs to understand it is like an illusion in that phenomena are not utterly non-existent, like a rabbit horn, the son of a barren woman, but rather that they appear in one way. They appear to have this kind of concrete, objective existence from their own side, but they don't actually exist in that way. We don't think of phenomena as being merely designated by mind on a collection of parts that are not actually that thing. So they aren't as they appear to beings, but this doesn't mean that they are utterly non-existent. So here, by taking up this kind of essence, this nectar or ambrosia of the Buddha's teaching, this is what allows one to attain freedom.
Chidara kume lambo la kedan jikpa nyi nang yang tela tenje yangda to kedan jikpa jikni kedan jikpa nyi mi tar se tere do nyi mi tar tandil mambu to tishin kyunre jikden la kedan jikpa nyi nang yang tambe tendo kewa ta jikpa yoba ma ino so tandil do tandil pa tamba meba to do chidara kume lambo la kuma kengi tata lambo rabu so tende tuwa ina siora kume lambo la kedan jikpa nyi nang yang se kewa dan jikpa la soba tezu tonya yore siora kuma koranda yore ba kuma de nawa nashi mer ma to so koti nga kemne chi tuwa tuza ko kuda kengi wanga naya te so tu yora chidara kume lambo la kedan jikpa nyi nang yang ta lambu koran la ya lambu ngone de cheti ke wadan jiban ro wadan tinde na na kon ro ngone de ke o mara sita kume lambu la ke dan jiban ni na ya tela tenje yang da do ngone tele ya ngone le ro wadan jiban yo re yo mara so so lol pa tribe wang ke thong de yo ma do yo mara tela tenje yang da do ke dan jiban ni me ta re pete na shire shira tishin kyunren jikden de tishin to kyumadan chikba de sora jikden jinde le longjo la soba sutra turu de chala soba tisu changma yang sora yu ngara zolo na de yu rangu ne yo bachi rangshin ji rangu ne yu korangu ne chuchi yo mato susu le pa takwa ti le wang kai me ba de chi samlu ku yara one chene tanya ji wang pa sha ku yara koran ma yinge chashe ram ba bo she tisu le ga chi de ne pa le wang pa di chi chi yin se tom de step ji mi sta yara se tanya ji wang pa sha ku ma to yu korangu ne ko rangshin ji chi yo na da ka gre se che de dire sha se de skola yu korangu ne chang ne kanga ge yi dong a thong na me o thong na kanga chi pa chi jang thong go ra ठीक है थोंको यो मारा ओ तेसु दा तागा ना शे पेते ना शे तेशे क्युंडे जिगदे दे जिगदे जिने लो लो ला सोबा सुटा ते जो रे जा ला सोबा ये दो हम ला सोबा ता ने ला सोबा चामल चा जुरा के दा जिगबा नि ना या से रांगो ने तुबे केवा दा जिगबा रांगो ने सुने शे इन बा ता फें शे इन बा ला सोबा ना वा ये ना या से तंबे तन दो केवा दा जिगबा नि ने यो मा ता तंबा ल्या ngone yu ngone chi yo ba ina ta ta tun chen ra ko ra ho dire to a se chi le fa zu zu se ri chi ko ra ta tun chen ni ye chi ko ra dire sha se ti yo ma ro ti de ko ten ta ko sam sha ko do 담배 돈도 껴와다 직관이네 요마에 더 담바 무랑원에 주발에 지지 요가 마예세 어디실럼이야 지시래 뭐야
So then next in verse 110, here giving the kind of actual refutation of this or sort of actual teaching. So here it then says an elephant created through magical illusion might seem to arise and cease, but ultimately there is not anything arising or ceasing at all. So here really this is teaching that ultimately there is no inherently existent arising and ceasing. If, for example, like in the way that a magician conjures up an elephant, an illusory elephant, it is the case that that illusion exists, right? There are all of these causes and conditions, like say the mantras that were said, the sort of basis of conjuring up that illusion. And although it is the case that that thing appears as an elephant but isn't a real elephant, we have to accept that there is this appearance, and it is an appearance based upon the mistaken our mistaken mind. So when it comes to all of the phenomena within the world, all of our abode, our body, our possessions, all of that, they seem to exist from their own side, as if there's nothing that is involved in terms of our mental projection or our mental labeling, that they had a kind of objective existence. It seems as though if we were to be asked, like, where is that thing? What is that thing? That we could point to it and we could say, well, this is it. But it is the case that there is ultimately no birth, no arising or destruction. So here, in the same way that although when a magician conjures up an illusory elephant, it arises and is destroyed. In actuality, there is no inherently existent arising and destruction in that way. And so, like in illusion, although it appears to us as though the phenomena within the world arise and are destroyed, ultimately there is no arising or destruction. So it seems as though, like with all phenomena, we could just point to the thing, like, oh, it's right there. It has that kind of objective existence in and of itself. But there is nothing that we can find when we search for the thing designated. We come up without being able to locate that.
야 미스터 나야 타임 비치 바스바 대다르 뜻은 대단히 세대에서 원래 뜻이래면서
대신 유저
주제지
지든
뜻이서
어.
다 대다르 주멜랑보네 가네자 마오 되지래 가네자 마오 간도야 메도야 람보랑 신게 에 라신게 좀 제반진바네 나라 속에 몽바참도 세베나 양다 니도나 양다 버 중세제 메바 콘도 치버차오 스타트디소 규메 달라든 투투디 코 미테 밀응아리 겹 에네 제르지 nga gebjene ti chide nga se ji mi lebe ta mo ati ke thongura mi ma lebe to so ke thong marwa ta ta thong mar lam bo tu tu thongir ma ke thong mare mi lebe ta mo ati ke tu ma tong ji ti ta ta lam bo kar tu na ti thong wara na wa na shi shamba yo re na wa yo re chera kama ke koran li ati na da na gi wara yena ko ngone yin sam sa shamba de yo mara ko koran tu shabde ha ku yo ra yine kol shenja da tinde yon se gyore ti diwa shera ti ke ji so chidare chume lambo kane jamao kando ya mendro ya lambo rangshin ba dong che ban jin ba ne nga la so be simje mong ba cham du se nga se ji mi le be tamo ha ti ke thong cham du se ba re so wara 양다 도나 내가 중세 연배가 콘도 치버셔 티디서 티디치 람네 되도 담아 도다르시샤
So I'm sorry, I think I forgot to read this next verse then, where 112, where it says then, Sorry, 111. So too, the world, like a magical illusion, might seem to arise and cease, but ultimately there is not any arising or ceasing at all. And so here then, continuing into the next set of verses, an illusory elephant does not come from anywhere, nor go anywhere. Since it is merely a manifestation of mental confusion, it does not ultimately exist. So here, when it comes to something, the way that phenomena appear to us, there's this example of an illusion, right? And so we can have someone who their eyes have been sort of affected by the magic, and they're looking at this illusion, and it appears as though like it is a real elephant, for example. So there are those in this context that have the kind of appearance of the thing as existing, and then they grasping to it. Now, someone who, say, arrives late and is not affected by the kind of magic of that magician, they might just see the basis of the creation of that illusion, like a stone or a stick or whatever it might be. And then there is the person who has conjured up the illusion, where for the most part, although they have the appearance of that illusory thing that has been conjured up, knowing that it is illusory, they don't really have clinging to that. Although sometimes they can, maybe if they've conjured up a beautiful woman, still have some sort of clinging to that. So here, as it explains, something that is an illusion, like an illusory elephant, does not come from anywhere nor go anywhere. Since it is merely a manifestation of mental confusion, it does not ultimately exist.
야, 다 걸렸어. 비면도 이거요.
대신 기대.
나도 아니도 내가 매트렸어. 솔가 주시 들어와.
나래.
야.
준이나.
된도 사서. 대신 규매지 된데 된도 사서. 조금 다 주시 받으라. 무슨 반에. 대다 좀 대다니. 타녀 다바 마도 봐. 강시 여담 매줄베. 직대된도 지시 여세더라. 그러니까 최 강시시. 그다를 뒤숨대 땅이세. 지금 뒤숨 잡아줘도 최 강시가를 여다 매버 주베. 직대된도 때에서. 그다를 뒤숨 땅이지 타녀 다바 마도 봐. 강시 여담 매주베 직대된도 지시 하더라. 뭐 강시 여담 매버 주베 직대된도 시다르 라시게 지시 여대 매버타스라 라시 주바 요 말에서 지den기 타냐 용게 샤바마도 마르셰베르 버테다르 마르셰베르 버테다르 민게 타냐도 다바 잠마도스 차셰마 무치라 때네데 민게 타냐 용게 파디디레스 domkyawni mingji tasha yora. Tetsamji yoba shabu yora. Tati ming tasha de kagre sanda chigli zuzu sake yo marwa. Mingdu taba mato bara. Tu sumdo kengai chiba lan debe tangni imbe chirosu. Tenji ngone rangshin trube kya wadan gagba de tata da maungba tu sum kandu ya chawa chingi chi yo maresi yora. Tende tetar tu sum de tangni se. Deva tata maungba tu kandu yona rawan tu truba rangshin trube chawa chingi tende chi yo maresi. Tu sum le ranguni truba debe tangni sheresi. Yoba maresi yora. Tanya dawana da merba se te marese. Chashe maenge chashe mabu chile tene. De chichi yin, de pumba yin, de kangba yin, de kambutar yin se mingchi tashe gara. De tare banga rese. Tanya dagbe wang shago rese, daga shago rita. Tokbe dag samsigdwa. Tanya ji wang shago samre. Te samla yin ma yin daga cha shago rmado. Tati sesage tanya dasage tunda de kagrese. Chechu tanga drone yung ke yomara. Ti yona ne rangune yobarang shi yore dwara. Teta tusum de tani tanya takba mato bar. Tanya jawang ke shakba sam mato bar. Yu rangune chubachi yomare sere. Kanshi yodan me jurbe jiten tundu chishi yuso. Tanya jawang ke shakba sam mato. Rangune chubake yobata yimba tama yimba tinte namsha kan yomare sere. 근데도 강신가를 봐. 다 매번 주변 직전 직전도 대랑신지 주바 지시유도 매번 타서 나르셰바테 나르셰베 리베테다르 타녀도 딱봐 어 딱봐 좀 마도버 뒤숨도 아니 깽가치 발에 데베 당이제 뒤숨도 다다 담모바 데벌이야 그뒤에나 라문에 주베 껴왔다 라문에 주베 데벌을 쏘고 차와치게 되지요 말이시도 야 뒤치
So here, so too the world, like a magical illusion, does not come from anywhere nor go anywhere, since it is merely a manifestation of mental confusion. It does not ultimately exist. So here, as those examples have illustrated, we now come to this point in, I believe this is verse 114, although some numbering is slightly different. The nature of the world transcends all three times, except for being designated in conventional terms. How could it be ultimately either existent or non-existent? So here, this point is really getting at how things are merely designated by thought, designated by convention, other than designating a particular thing on a collection of parts that is not actually that thing. There is no inherently existent object that can be found. And so here, as has been explained above. Again, it isn't that phenomena are utterly non-existent. Whatever sort of phenomena it is, it doesn't have this kind of ultimate existence or non-existence. So when we think about, as it says here, it's not as though there was something that existed before and then became utterly non-existent. It would be the case that that would then have to be the case that there were some sort of inherent existence that became non-existent. But as per the kinds of reasonings that were described above, we can say that thusly all phenomena are merely posited by thought, that in the three times, the nature of the world transcends all three times, in the sense that there's no sort of inherently existent before or earlier, inherently existent now, or inherently existent future, but rather that phenomena have the kinds of a kind of existence that is not ultimate or inherent, that is merely posited by the force of thought. It seems as though like we should be able to search for the thing that we have designated, but no matter what the phenomena it is, whether we talk about like a horse or an ox or a computer or whatever, it's something that is designated upon a collection of parts. None of those is actually that thing. It's not findable. We can't in this kind of search locate that thing. But phenomena exist as merely designated by thought. So the three times too are not inherently existent, but they also are sort of exhausted in being merely designated by name and thought.
야, 다들 다들 된다봐 뒤쳐보는 시다. 근데 다시도 롱마된 배추센다 어디 시도 왔다. 달래도 또 야, 숨바 다시 롱마된 배추센 시도 와. 뒤가래서나 산제 끼니 준딜레서 산제 남제 지데 타단데 마데 니가 니밀어서 봐. 롱마된 배추센 디레서 오라. 산제 남제 주센 딜레서 오라. 타요 바다 담에다 타요바의 말을 담에바의 말을 쓰라. 네가 레베스 때 말을 네가 많이 버리베스 때 말을 때 힘이 그냥 롱마된 버와. 어때 롱마된 배추 센티를 써라. 롱마 롱데 만제 셴레 미세. 어디다 제바카께도 선디라. 산제 남제 타시len 데베 주체 실레스 산제 남제 타시len 데베 규생 딜레스 다시 롱마덴베 다 규생 딜레스 롱마덴베 다시 롱마덴베 규생 딜레스 오라 다시 롱마덴베 단다 롱마덴베 이제 규생 신여봐 규생 신 여베시 롱마덴베 마인베스 직대 타여다 타메다 이가 마인바시 롱마덴베 롱 마덴버 제버스 롱 마덴베 주세티레스 와라 타이어 세데 컨디션 스고르스 타이어 등겐 지데 타이어 반 등겐 소레스네 장변 반도 바타라 센데르 세기 치머 메주반 지데 타이어로 와 장변 버전에 센디마도 겨와 치머 요마로 제주 타이어 켈랭 겨라 지데 타이어레스 센데르 조사르 타마타마 시순나니 타마테레스라 디체르 겨와 치머 요마라 타이어 등겐 소레스네 장변반도 바타라 센디르 세기 치머르 민주바레데 다조사르 타이어체라 다 매번도 게르 소레스네 장전바데레 시장이 시장도 장전바데 데카르스고스네 센데 다더니 치머르 주바다 그 라마베 치지 센데 다데 센데 다데네 라마르 치지 그 시대 침박에 부분날이야 슈드와르 스케일링 거라 포아부 다스도 센데 다데 바 폰도레 에스도 다데 단 그만 마부 조사서 포세도 단다 대동가라 저 된데 삼기도 소소데다 겨 치마르 진 도야르 치바 삼도다도 근데 말했어도 배는 아주 빼망부 차임바 멜로나 제신 손년에 신대지 유엔에 비게 규진진에 티 요니 퍼줘대 치려도 와라 마르메트 빼셔와 마르메트 치파셔도 않고 마음이 땅보다 니버데 숨벌 바 펀드할게요 말아 마음에 여배 또게 교단 깨데 사도데 침을 고제데 라라라라지 용되게 와라 데레 마도 저기 이내 님만 샤네 되어데 컴퓨터다 대산데 야보다 TV지나 피네지 샤네 동다 퇴장 본다 사야 마부나 lep되게 와라 이 피네 용 디나 슈드에게 요 말아 그럼 피게 유엔데 여배데 차례 근데 우르지네 디나 차려 거라 사다 돈레네 저마르마도 요지 인신 추다치 땅에랑 시쟁이나 규진 찬선의 대샤려 그러마도 디난 피네야 드르니 디난 드레지 요 말아 딘다 신이스도 아주 달래로 삼지거리 마부시에서 사베 큐르나 차스페 마부시에바 좀 미치 좀 사비
야다.
좀 사비는 피네 좀 쉬대 통선나 칼은 좀 주당 그랬어도 그 편에 좀이 되나 결례 말아 비게 좀이 된데 소도는 내일 칼 가지고 다는 것도 다나시 셰르스 라바이나 넘버를 라바이나 가져대 라브데 랜드세 버르질 거베 지마치신 셰토로야 루탄토라 그거에 되나 슈드에게 말아 그런 편에 라브데네 주진지 산선 되나시 따타요 거라 사베 큐르다 시세 때 가셔지와 가셔서 카드 마음에 melodja 카네 카드라리체라 마음에 찍을래 니체제 카드 마음에 멜로나리아티레티체 숭예레체 카드 마음에 melodja 카드 마음에 melodja 사베 링유제체 큐르무 토와다 큐무 사와토다 큐무 클럽디 칼칼주타메체 큐다사 작샤디치바 디네 바케 잡셔도 퍼줘데 고야지네 가스가 좋게 잡은 것도 다 컴퓨터도 집어라 바치 랍셔도 퍼줘도 좋다요 것도 작샤세라 네 멜로세티 숨예체데 테제 모르게도 두르 빼찬시도 이시는 남에 포함을 다 해봐서 시도 말아줘 삼르나 소소디파 단대 예베 디파 루이베 나오리스도 디제나니 비게 미임바 던르르지 계스도 던르 임바 니가 임바를 차그라 퍼져된 간주 단대 삼루 때다 단대 지 삼루 단다데 비난 주도에서시 샤기하라 디오 말하고 티켓이라도 된대요. 그 발렌스다. 타연의 장비 버셔라. 탐메데 디셔. 탐메데 장비 버셔. 타연의 장신 버셔. 그래서 세대 땅이 심을 주바다. 타연 탐메니가 임바드네. 지르바. 지르바 젠더와 젠더도 그래서 그랬으나 타연 탐메니가 되게 되래도 와. 그 가르스나 내가 타연 세대도 와. 내가 타다 대라 장신 탐메 버셔. 내가 타던 데부터 라버르치도 단다 여거데 두요 말이나 양 고치지 레베시거라. 자 내가 붙여는 다 여버치래. 단데 미디 고양 저르치라. 지만디 고라시디야 뒤균디 치마 더데 근데 삼다기 저라. 근데 시시래. 니까시래. 지부바 데가다다. 내가 타다. 다 타요 타면 니가 뭐더라. 니가 많이 받네 내마 보여라 그때봐 나뭐 산집에 또 내마 보였대 봐되게 타요 타면 니가 많이 받는데 그도와 니가 많이 받네 내마 보였대 봐 거지 너 받아라 안에 가서도 가사 야게 가야 저도 매봐 다 됐고 야 저도 매봐 생들아 다들 땅에다 간다지 딱 봐야신다 견치도 나버셔네 딱 봐요 말해 미다바에서는 깨지 매우선에 내가 제도 말서 치료받아야 돼 템버리도 삼 가야 주면에서 주면에 와서다 타요 탐에 가야 주면에 왔었어요 근데 kellam banashi 야 대버도 칠람나 된대서 봐봐 야
Oh yeah. So then next, coming in verse 115, basically this is sort of summarizing the reason that the Buddha remained silent on certain questions. So for this reason and no other, the Buddha said that the world was indeterminate with regard to four aspects, having or not having an end, both or neither. So here, this is again, based upon this skillful means of the Buddha, not teaching a limit in terms of there is a reason for doing so, and this is because again, if you were to teach any of these, there would be sort of wrong views that would come from that. So when it came to whether there is a limit or no limit, both or neither, the Buddha did not left that indeterminate. So here, when it comes to those that assert that there is a limit, we could look at the hedonists, or sort of the Chakravartins, who would say that, well, other than this life right now that we have, once this life is done, our continuum is completely cut. So this ends then. So there is a kind of limit to the universe and the person. This is the view of those sort of hedonists. Now, when we look at someone who would assert that there is no limit, this includes the kind of Samkhya school, those that assert that there are these 25 knowable objects and so forth. And they would say that there is really no limit, in the sense that the self that we have right now is something that is like transferable. So here, this is something that is refuted in various scriptures. There is a verse that kind of summarizes the examples of this, that we don't actually transfer. The kind of self that we have right now doesn't transfer into a new life, but rather when all of the causes and conditions come together, we can talk about their taking rebirth. And this is sort of summarized in this verse. I don't know if I'll get every single one, but this is like prayers, like a flame, like a reflection of a mirror, a kind of seed giving rise to a sprout, something like an echo. These examples are given because of the fact that, like something with a reflection of a face in a mirror, it's not as though our face transfers to that mirror, but rather when all of the causes and conditions come about, there is the appearance of a reflection of that face in a mirror. Or so too with a flame. A flame, there is a continuity of of sort of similar moments of that flame, but it's not as though that flame transfers from one moment to the next moment to the next moment, right? There's a continuity, but there isn't a kind of transference of that thing. And so too, when it comes to like our taking rebirth, when well, actually, with any of these things, but when the causes come together, there is the appearance, but it's not as though that appearance sort of has an inherent kind of existence. Other examples are like when someone has something sour in their mouth, and you see that, and your own mouth starts to pucker and sort of produce saliva because of that. It's not as though anything has been transferred from there, but due to the causes and conditions coming about, we can have the occurrence of that. Or like when we teach someone a song or a prayer or something else, it's again not as though there's something that is transferred from the teacher to the student, but having recited that many times, now they have it in their head. So there is a kind of a verse, again, I believe it's by Nagarjuna somewhere, that he explains like prayers like a flame, like a reflection of a face in a mirror, a seed in a sprout, there's something sour in one's mouth, a kind of echo, and so forth. There's no actual transfer of this self. Like, and we often fall into this kind of thinking wherein we think like, oh, well, I here as a human, if I were to say be born as an animal, like the human me would kind of become that animal or would go into that animal, transfer into that, as if though we would have our own sort of intelligence and consciousness and so forth. But rather, this is something that that's not actually how it works. There's no self that is transferred. Again, this is looking at there being no limit or no end to the self, but it is something that like moves from one to the next. And then when we talk about those that assert that there is both a limit and no limit, includes the Jains, who would say that temporarily there is a limit, right? As in we will reach the end of this life and have to go to another. But because there's ultimately no limit, as in we're not, that continuity is not completely severed, although there is sort of temporarily a limit, we will continue on. And then those that assert that neither of those, either a limit or no limit, includes our own school of the Vatsiputriyas that are sort of on the edge of being Buddhist, but because they assert that there is this kind of isolated self that is inexpressible, this leads to their asserting that there's neither a limit nor not a limit to this. So here, when the Buddha is giving these kinds of teachings in which he says that certain things are undeterminate, or with regard to these four aspects of their being, whether the self and the world have an end or not have an end, both or neither. This is done for a particular reason, for a particular purpose, because if he were to give an answer, one could fall into some of these wrong views as are held by these other philosophical schools.
Oh yeah, well, that is digital song.
So
Okay.
we're out of time for today, so we will leave it there.
Thank you for resuming the teachings. And thank you, Katrina, for your very clear translations. And for all those watching online, we hope to see you here again next Monday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific. So we'll finish with some dedication prayers. May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the three worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.